Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the BIA COVID-19 update webinar. Great to see you all back again. Thanks for joining. It's an interesting week again that we've been through. I mean, it's fascinating. I say this every week, but I mean, so much news, so much going on. I'm going to turn to Steve in a minute to chat through the latest news. There's plenty to cover off. But one of the big things we saw this week was the extension of the government's business support package. So that's the focus of our webinar today. And I'm really delighted that we've been able to recruit the fantastic Nooman Haque, who's Managing Director of Life Sciences and Healthcare at Silicon Valley Bank, to join us today as our expert from the finance community. And he's going to be doing a bit of a double act with our own policy expert, Martin Turner. We're going to talk through the details of those new schemes that have been announced and just give you a bit of an analysis of what we think of them and how they could work for BIA members in the sector. There's a lot to cover. What I would say up front is, if some of you have seen those announcements, some of those schemes, do fire in the questions as we're going through up front, because actually what I'd quite like is a good deck of questions to put to Martin and to Nooman when we get to that section of the webinar. So please start firing those questions in up front, depending on whether you've seen it or not. If you haven't, that's fine. Martin will talk through the details, but it'd be good to get lots of questions in or any comments that you've got. Okay, so morning, Steve. I'm going to turn to you first for our regular news update. What's your kind of take on the week so far?
It's been very sunny, is my initial take, but let's have a look at the next slide.
Okay, just give me 1 second. There we go. So latest developments, turning to our first big development of the week. So, well, oh, sorry, that's gone too far.
You've zoomed me through. Yeah, no, I think we've been waiting for a while for some support for the sector. Sorry, just land on a slide and I will then talk to it. Yeah,
no,
so
sorry.
We've seen a real recognition of the UK life science sector stepping up in the national response, and I think you've seen the particular drive in the ramp up of testing capability. The Lighthouse Labs obviously operational now, and in terms of engagement from BIA members, many of them have engaged in the novel solutions for testing challenges through the crowdsourcing piece that we've worked with BIVDA and the Royal College of Pathology. So I think that's coming on stream. I know that there are challenges with the logistics around getting matching supply and demand. I think there's plenty of demand out there. There's certainly increasing supply, and I think you can see that our sector has stepped up to be part of that. And thank you once again to those of you who lend kit, people, or engage with the process. And I hope there's a clearer plan that enables companies to engage with it. More from that from the government this afternoon. Another webinar, we'll touch on that at the end.
Yeah, so we had Hugh Pym. He went to visit the Milton Keynes lab, so some really great footage there, I thought, showing the Thermo Fisher kit in action. And that's just a quote there from Lord James Bethell, just really recognising what you've just said about the real strength of the response from industry. Okay, good. Lots of developments on vaccines as well. So we saw the government announce the task force and additional funding, didn't we?
Yeah, we've seen that funding announced in 2 tranches last week, and then again the day before yesterday. So I think, thank you to BIA members who've been at the heart of this. Obviously, there's fantastic discovery work going on in Imperial and the Jenner at Oxford. But as you know, we've put together a great group of BIA member companies under the leadership of Ian McCubbin and Nettie England to support the scale up and development stages of that. And it's great to see that group coming together, really making a difference. And within that, obviously, the VMIC Centre, the Vaccines Manufacturer Centre, has been fast-tracked at Harwell, and they can get going. I don't think it's quite as beautiful as the picture is there yet. I think it's that's concept pit shot rather than the finished building. But if they'd done that in a week, I would be amazed. But certainly everything is going full guns blazing on this. And thank you to members who are involved in this. I think it really is excellent. And if you think of the UK in the global race here, we've certainly got some runners and riders that are now in clinical trial, now first one in clinical trial, another recruiting clinical trial, up there with competitors or others who are having a go at this from Germany and the US. So great to see this come together, and I think members can be really proud of the work they've done in this space.
Yeah, so there's some positive news for the government, but it hasn't all been plain sailing this last week, has it? I mean, we've seen them under quite a lot, well, Matt Hancock under quite a lot of pressure on the PPE issue and the testing target. I mean, there's just some clips about it. How do you feel like, this has gone, and where is it going to go, Steve?
Well, I think you can see that the work that we've done in terms of helping provide capability and capacity has been useful. I think it is difficult when to triage all of the requests for help with a national crisis. I think you can see that's particularly challenging in PPE, both in terms of the distribution of it, getting to care homes and all the rest of it, and to do it in the full glare of a media spotlight with a national crisis on makes it even more difficult. So I think that is a challenge. I think what we're doing is we're trying to make sure that the capacity of the sector is aligned to deliver on the national need, and we're trying to be the interlocutor between the government and industry. It's not perfect in terms of getting communication back, and not everybody is able. I know there's frustration in the system on this, but I hope that we're getting more clarity from the government. We're enabled to engage our community more effectively. Certainly in the lab capacity, it feels better than it did a couple of weeks ago. I think that's demonstrated by the amount of capacity that's available. Some of these other things about where the sites aren't really stuff that we've got core competency in, but I think it's going. Who knows? We'll have the deadline at the end of the month next week, and I think we'll have some element of testing with track and tracing and being at the core of the plan to come out of lockdown in the coming weeks and months, and I'd expect to see developments of that in coming days.
Yeah, so you talked there about the interface between government and the sector, didn't you? And I'm just going to bring up a polling question which you gave me last night for people to kind of respond on that specific issue. So do you want to read it out while I load it up on the system?
Yeah, no, I mean, people have found this really helpful, and this would be really helpful for me. I mean, I'm just trying to get a sense as to whether you think, whether you government support that you've put in or ideas, have you been able to put forward a proposal or an offer, and are you waiting for a response? Have you had a positive response? Have you put something forward and been told no or not there, and you've considered putting one in, but you've not known how to do it or decided against it, or you've not submitted a proposal or offer? I'm interested to see where people are on this journey, because I think it's a dynamic picture. I think a couple of weeks ago it would have got a different response to today, and perhaps we'll come back to this in a couple of weeks' time. So trying to get a sense as to where you are in the system if you've offered to support on COVID-19.
Okay, still waiting for quite a few people to vote. Get them in now. Give you another 10 seconds or so.
Thank you. I think that's probably about where we're going to get to. Shall we call that one?
Okay, let me just share the result for you. There we go.
Thank you. So most people haven't submitted something, unsurprisingly, probably focused on core business. Some people have considered it, but not quite sure how to, or have decided against. Perhaps we should break that out, and it'd be useful to see whether it's been the process that's put them off. I'm glad to see a small percentage of people have had a positive response, and lots of people still waiting to hear. Probably interesting to see within that group, and 6% have been told no. So thank you, useful for us to know that. And if you want to add some comment in the chat about this, I'd certainly be useful from my perspective to be able to understand what we can do to help with this.
Yeah, good stuff. Just an aside for me in terms of the system here, Steve was just wondering, if anyone's wondering why we end up with these responses, it's just worth noting that the maximum of 5 answers we can build into this system. So if anyone's thinking that the question design could be improved, you're right, but we have limits on this, unfortunately. Okay, good stuff. Well, the other thing that really happened over the last few days, Steve, which you and I worked quite hard on to get the news out last weekend, was this point about eligibility for antigen testing.
Yeah. So I think this could be quite a big use for members. If you've got people in your company who do have symptoms of COVID, the list of companies that are eligible to use the system, the national testing program, has been expanded and includes people in our sector working in critical medicines, vaccines and medical devices. And you can come to us to get information as to how you can provide information to your staff as to how they can make an appointment for a test at a national centre, and it's up on the website. I think that this goes to show how central to the COVID effort our sector is seen, and I hope this is something that members will be able to use to reassure their own staff and support staff who may be in this place. It's certainly a big thing from our perspective, and the details are there. It's a fairly simple process to use, and yeah, I'm delighted that they've extended that capacity to our sector.
Yeah, we haven't got a question on it today, but maybe we could ask one on the webinar next week about whether anyone's actually used the service and how they found it. That'd be quite interesting to know, wouldn't it?
Yeah, good thinking. If there is anybody, please put your thoughts in the chat.
Yeah, great. Okay.
I know there's questions about regionality in this, Wales and Scotland, and we're bottoming that out, aren't we?
Yeah, that's live at the moment. I'm still kind of on the line for a response from Office for Life Sciences on the position in Wales and Scotland, and they've promised to get back to me this morning on it. So more detail soon on that.
This is a UK scheme, so I'm imagining it will work UK wide, but that's my working assumption. But we need the detail.
Okay, well, what I can say on that, Steve, the response I've had so far from them is that eligibility varies slightly by nation, but once they've got the kind of the new portal that they're developing up for registering for a test, I think they're expecting that to be nationwide. The other interesting thing they said was if you're in Scotland or Wales and you think you can get to one of the England's test centres, there's nothing stopping you doing that other than the kind of the logistics of getting there. But anyway,
and try to avoid unnecessary travel, which is what we all try to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Okay, good. The other thing that happened this week was we saw the results from the big kind of Oxford antibody testing of the lateral flow tests being published, didn't we? You know, it wasn't too good, was it?
No, I mean, I think those of you who joined the John Bell webinar, the government webinar last week, where he was talking through where they got to with the antibody tests, there is now a pre-publication. Obviously, it's a pre-publication. We've shared the link. John went through the data. So if you're looking for that scientific data, it is now out and about. Here it is, and we're keen to make sure that people are aware of it. Obviously, there's evolving science happening as we speak on many of these things, and I know that there is an MHRA requirement for 98% on the specificity for future tests. So people may find some of this data useful if you're working in that space, and I hope you can find it through our website if you've not seen it. But I know people were interested last week, and here it is. The other thing I think you've put up here is the new thing overnight.
Yeah. So this is a population level study, isn't it, from ONS, which the government's going to put in place. Two parts to it, aren't there? The first is a kind of a sort of a population level antigen test to see how many people have got the live virus, and they're saying 20,000 households in the first wave. I think people are going to get tested once a week for 5 weeks, they're saying, results early May. And then there's this second bit, which is the kind of the prevalence of antibodies in the population, 1,000 people to give blood samples. And we heard that there's a BIA member company in that, didn't we, Steve?
Yeah, IQVIA, I think, are part of the consortium that are working on this, which is great. So I think you can see here there's a new drive to do a more specific population-based program, which I think is a key building block of the future track and trace. And just as people who are following this should be aware, lots is moving. This is the piece that's moved overnight. I think you've taken this from HuffPost. Perhaps we'll see some more detail on it from the government this afternoon at the webinar.
Yeah, that's exactly, isn't it? And I've got a question in here on the questions box from Sam saying any more detail on antibody testing. Well, you just heard a little bit there, but as Steve said, the government webinar, which is linked to on our website, bioindustry.org site. Sign up for that. It's 2:45 this afternoon. More details on that in a second. Okay, well, turning to the financial support package, Steve, but taking care not to steal Martin and Nooman's thunder. These are just the kind of, do you want to just quickly run through at a top level what was announced this week then?
Yeah, so I think that the key thing is the one in the middle, the new knowledge economy business support package. 1.25 billion was the headline figure for firms driving innovation. This comes in part as a result of some of the work that we've done as a coalition of knowledge economy organisations with the Future Fund and the additional grant support. I'll leave it to Nooman and Martin to talk about it, but in a sense it sits within a broader package of measures which some companies in our sector I know have taken advantage of. The furlough scheme, which has now been extended to the end of June, which is important if you're hitting payroll deadlines or the need to think about issuing redundancy notices. That's obviously going massive through the economy, and that sits on one side of it. And then, of course, there's expanded loan schemes for larger businesses. I think we've seen that coronavirus large business interruption loan scheme not be perfectly fitted for many of the BIA members. So we're aware of it. It's there, but we think the stuff in the middle is likely to be the most value to BIA members. And I pay tribute to the work that Martin's done and the work that I know Nooman's done in helping frame some of these pieces. And that's why it's great that we're able to discuss it in detail. But I'll leave it to the experts to talk about it.
Okay, finally on update, Steve, just a bit of news that you picked out in the sector this week. It's worth flagging, isn't it?
Yeah, it's nice to be able to have some good news that keeps going on, isn't it? I mean, life does continue in terms of the sector, and the nanotherapeutics have been acquired by Astellas in a £12 million deal. So, you know, stuff is continuing to happen across the piece, and we're always keen to celebrate sector development where we see it. So well done to David and the Nano team.
Okay, good stuff. All right, let's just check questions. Questions coming in thick and fast for you, Martin and Nooman. So I'm just going to give you the kind of the first go at kind of introducing this, and we'll have a bit of a chat. But I'll throw these questions in as we go. But just to kind of note, Peter, Raymond, I'm going to pick up your questions in a second. But let's just go through to follow on what Steve said there about the detail of the scheme. But firstly, I'll just say hello, Nooman. Thank you for joining us.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. Well, be here. I'm at home, obviously, but pleasure to be here.
Yeah, this is the new normal, though, isn't it? Okay, Martin, let's just make sure we can hear you before I turn to you to say something.
Hello.
Okay, brilliant. Well, with no further introduction, I think, Martin, you're going to start by just kind of setting out some of the details of what's been rolled out today, and then kind of go through the elements, unpacking what Steve's just said there. So over to you.
Absolutely. So Steve said, I mean, what's been announced this week sits within a broader package of measures that the government has rolled out over the past month. So we thought we'd just look back at those to see what got us here today, essentially. And the story starts at the budget on the 13th of March, just over a month ago, when the government announced, as part of its early response to COVID-19, that it would pay sick pay for employees suffering from COVID-19. It would provide business rates relief and guarantee loans to businesses for £1.2 million per business. Just 4 days later, the need was clearly increasing in obviousness, and those loans were extended to £5 million, and the Bank of England announced a financing facility for very large businesses as well. 3 days later, the government announced that it would pay furloughed workers' wages and allow companies to defer taxes like VAT. Then we had, in April, the large business scheme for companies over £45 million a year turnover to be able to access larger loans as well. So you can see the government and British Business Bank has been working very hard to roll out support for all different parts of the economy, for individuals, for charities and businesses. And throughout this time, we've been working closely with them, first to make the case for intervention for our sector and the rest of the knowledge economy, and then on what that support could look like. These things all have to go through the Chancellor and then through the Cabinet, which is one of the reasons why it's taken so long to get to where we are today. Now, I believe we've got a poll. Is that right, Michael, before we go into the details of what's been announced this week?
We just thought it would be quite interesting to see, I mean, again, bearing in mind we can only list 5 things here, which of the main schemes that you just run through people may have used to date. So let's just launch this and just see if we can get a quick read from the audience on it. Just give me a second while I get this up on the system. And maybe Martin, you can read out the questions.
Yep, so I'll talk through these. So which of these government support schemes is your organisation using or considering using? Is that the furlough job retention scheme, the loans via British Business Bank and high street banks, grant funding from Innovate UK, which was announced this week, the tax deferral options, or the business rates relief? And you can obviously only choose one, I think, from this. Is that right, Michael?
That's right, unfortunately. So,
yeah,
yeah,
perhaps choose the one that you have found most useful.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, sorry, apologies for the kind of the limitations in the system, but it should give us I think it should give us an interesting read, and in fact, it already is. Let's just see if we can get a few more people voting on this. Give it another 10 seconds or so. Okay, give it another 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Okay, good stuff. Here's the result, Martin. I'll let you talk through it.
Okay. So obviously the grant funding announced this week, which I'll talk through in more detail in a moment, is way out in front there with 56% of our viewers saying they'll access that. And then the furlough job retention scheme, second with 28%, not surprising there. Loans, as we've said to government, are not useful for our sector, which is why we've been campaigning for something more. And then the tax deferral used by a few, and business rates relief, barely any as well. So really, really useful, and kind of confirms what we've been saying to government, which is helpful.
Yeah, I'll just pick up a couple of comments people have been putting in. We haven't got a none of the above option, and that's again due to the number of responses we can put in here. But I think we can see from the numbers that have voted, roughly speaking, that I'd say probably half of the people who could have voted there, Martin, didn't opt for any of these, which suggests that that may be none of the above. Okay, good stuff. Let's hide that, and I'll let you talk through a bit more detail on the on the 1.5 billion package.
Thank you. So yes, what's been announced this Monday is a package totaling 1.25 billion. That's including private co-investment alongside it. So 1.25 billion for innovative firms, and it comes in two parts: a grant scheme and a convertible loans facility. So first, the grants. This is £750 million in total into 3 chunks. 200 million will be used to accelerate payments to existing customers, which we understand means providing payments in advance rather than arrears for those who have got grant funding programs underway. You'll need to opt in to take advantage of this. 550 million will be used to increase support for existing customers. We're seeking clarity on exactly what that means, and we are expecting more details to be publicly announced in the coming days. But we think it might mean receiving a top-up if your original grant application was for more than the sum you were awarded due to Innovate UK budget constraints at the time. But we're waiting to hear what they announce on that. The focus of the support is on existing customers, which I believe is so that they can get the money out the door quickly, because there'll obviously be less need for due diligence because they'll already have done that for the original grant. Now, we've commissioned Beauhurst to do some analysis for us, and we've determined that 18% of the sector are currently customers, i.e. they have an active grant, and 56% have once held a grant. We're therefore urging Innovate UK to include that 56% as customers, so that as many as possible can benefit from it. Now, there is support for non-customers as well, and that takes the form of £175,000 in a grant, which is de minimis for state aid. Anything below 200,000 is below de minimis, meaning there's no restrictions on which companies can access that, and that's welcome, because we have written to the Chancellor recently to say state aid is often a blocker for cash burning biotech companies to access grant support. So we're pleased that they have considered that. However, we do appreciate that £175,000 is not going to go far for many members with multi-million-pound R&D programs, and we will continue to push the government for more for that. And as part of that, we are expecting over the coming months the normal Innovate UK grant funding programs to also be rolled out, which are the ones that you would see in normal times, where companies will be able to access larger grants. Now, moving on to convertible loans.
Actually, just before you do that, can we just pick up a couple of questions on the Innovate scheme, just for clarity? I mean, one from Matt Chapman here. Innovate UK funding seems to actually be 750 plus 210, because that's 175k per firm times 1,200 firms. Now, this is a question we were mulling over yesterday, wasn't it? I forget where we got to on this.
No, we've put in the questions to Innovate UK and the Office for Life Sciences about the maths, and we're waiting to hear back. We're a bit confused about it too.
Yeah, exactly. So if a company, so Vincent Farrelly saying, if we want to involve EU partners in a project, can these partners be supported? That relates to eligibility, doesn't it?
Yes, I would imagine they'd need to be UK companies receiving the money. We can certainly put that question to Innovate UK. We've already sent in quite a few questions to help them know what to explain when they announce this formally, but we're waiting for more details from Innovate UK. That might be part of it, and we'll certainly make that point to them.
Okay, and then finally, just clarity here, Susan now they're saying, is this new grants or is it just more money for existing? And I think what we're saying here is it's both, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the chunk of it at the moment is more money or advanced money for companies already in receipt of grant funding, and then that 175k per company, which Innovate UK have said will go to 1,200 companies. That is new money.
Yeah. And the $1 million question here, well, actually £175,000 question from Nick Gregory, which is, what are the eligibility criteria for those new grants?
I mean, it's de minimis, so it's usually, I mean, you've got to be a UK company, I'm sure, but it's de minimis, so it's usually quite a light touch assessment to get that money. But we'll just have to wait and see what Innovate UK announced publicly.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. Right.
We're hoping to do a bit more on this as the details become clearer. I think it does make sense. There's obviously a lot of appetite for this, and we'll do a bit of this in the coming days or weeks as we get clarity on it.
That's right, Steve. Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, I'm going to turn to Nooman now. So to talk, or actually, Martin, do you want to go through the details of the Future Fund scheme first? That's what we're going to do.
I just do the basics, and then we'll get Nooman's expert commentary. So the second part of the package is a convertible loan facility called the Future Fund. Through this, the government will, through the British Business Bank, provide 125k to 5 million in convertible loan funding, provided you can get an existing or new investor to match it at least 1-to-1. It's not entirely clear, but we think that match investment can either be in the form of a convertible loan from those other investors or debt or equity. And we're certainly urging the government to provide that flexibility. The loan is intended to get you to your next funding round. At the moment, essentially, they're expecting that to be in a few months' time when the market has recovered, but they are open to extending that support further if the market conditions require it. At the next financing round, the loan will convert to equity and interest will be paid at 8% per annum. My understanding from the government is that the British Bank do not intend to stay on the cap table, but that depends on a decision made at that point in time. The terms do allow for the government to sell a bundle of these loans to institutional investors, so that might be another route they take. In the event of no funding round, the loan matures after 3 years, and finally the proceeds can only be used for working capital, not paying bonuses or advisors, and there'll be more details announced in May. Now I'm happy to, well, me and Nooman will take questions, but my details at the bottom of that screen there. I'm really keen to get your feedback so that when I'm talking to the Treasury and other government officials, we can kind of represent the sector's views. So please do email me on this.
Good stuff. Now, Martin, I wonder if you could do me a favour while Nooman and I are chatting this through. I wonder if you could have a look through the questions box and see if you can pick out any that we can give a response to. But turning to you, Nooman, I mean, thanks again for joining us. Fantastic to have you with us. I mean, you've been a little bit involved in the development of this scheme, haven't you? Talking to HMT. What's been your role on this so far in its development?
Yeah, so I think Steve opened with there's been a broad coalition, I think, talking to HMT, I think principally on the back of the CBILS announcement, sort of recognizing that that probably wasn't entirely appropriate for earlier stage innovative companies. So, Silicon Valley Bank, along with BIA, along with members of the tech community as well, I think have been aligned as a coalition to talk about the issues and the funding gaps that exist and the fact that the innovation ecosystem as a whole needs a response to this. And I think one of the things, just to, I think, give you guys a plug, is really the power not only of a membership organization like the BIA, but also the power of sort of recognizing that these issues exist across a range of industries, not just life sciences, and the power of being able to then speak to the Treasury in quite testing times as one.
Yeah, okay, sounds good. So for people like me who don't really have a detailed knowledge of this kind of instrument, can you just give us kind of an overview of how convertible loan notes actually work? I mean, how are they used in practice? I mean, this is something that builds on something that already exists in some form, isn't it?
Yeah, so I mean, I won't go into real detail depth. We don't want to do a convertible masterclass, otherwise I'm going to watch the numbers of your attendees drop off quite precipitously, I assume. But why don't we actually dial it back just sort of a little bit and try and get you in the head of what HMT was thinking about when it came up with this scheme. And I think for me there are sort of three principles that underlie the approach that's been taken here with the Future Fund, and they are speed, simplicity, and inclusiveness. And a convertible loan actually speaks to all of those things. Many of your members who have venture funding will be familiar with convertible loans as an instrument that expedites funding into a company, leaving complex issues of valuation and board rights and things like that for a later stage. So it certainly speaks to speed. It's pretty simple in that regard as well. The government has come out with a draft term sheet, which is available on the HMT site, I believe. Now, it is still being worked on. The government has retained 3 legal firms, Cooley, Goodwin, and Taylor Wetting, I believe, who are holding their own webinars on some of the more technical details. But the broad principles we understand as well, and they are pretty standard commercial convertible loan terms as well. And inclusiveness as well, inclusiveness both in the sense of sort of life stage. So you can see by the the smallest ticket that the British Business Bank will write, it is open to quite early stage companies as well. So it is a commonly used instrument in venture financing rounds, and it's the right instrument to use as well, I think, rather than the problem with if it was coming in as equity. There's all sorts of issues with it for a government doing equity, of course, but the principal problem is one of speed. Having to do diligence, negotiate board rights, negotiate valuation, and the convertible loan instrument simply takes all that away.
Yeah, so I mean, it's good to hear that you think it's the right move. Do you think that's going to be? Do you think the investment community broadly is going to agree with that? I mean, what are investors going to make of this?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a few already since the announcement, and obviously we were talking to the venture capital community over the last few weeks, in fact, alongside our discussions with Treasury. And I think it's going to be broadly well received, actually. No scheme is ever going to be perfect, of course. There is a cost, and it's worth stressing that this isn't bailout money. This is pretty commercial terms, actually. If you read through the fine print, I mean, this is not rollover money. It's not necessarily either money that you should just take and run and think, well, this is, a great deal. It won't be a great deal for every single company. But the structure of it, I think, is right. The commercial terms are, there or thereabouts. So I think it will be broadly received, particularly as it meets those principles of being simple and quick to execute.
Yeah. So if a business, one of our members would be considering applying for this product, what do you think, what sort of steer would you give them? I mean, I suppose both in terms of who should be interested in it, and what should they be doing at this point while they're sort of waiting for the final details to emerge?
Yeah, so I mean, whilst there is more technical detail forthcoming, we know in broad outline, what some of the key eligibility criteria, are, and I think there are 3 to focus on, which I'm sure most of your members, already meet. But just to kind of summarize, it is for UK companies, so not crucially sort of UK subs of foreign top, for example. So it's UK companies.
Yeah.
They have to have raised at least 250k in the last 5 years privately, and they've got to have a substantive UK presence. That's a term open to interpretation. We don't know yet what that means. It may well be that they sort of co-opt existing criteria from other schemes to assess a substantive UK presence. They're the key sort of criteria. So I think the first thing is to, if you're interested, is to think, does that apply to me clearly? I think beyond that as well is I would have a look at the term sheet. There are some key things in there to understand. Most of the things in there won't be really frightening at all. I mean, from a corporate governance perspective, whilst it's a convertible loan, there are the normal customary sort of minority, rights there as well. There's no encumbrance or anything, normal sort of warranties. So there's nothing frightening there. The pricing is there or thereabouts. I think the key actions that I would advise members to undertake are start talking to your board and investors now, because they will have an opinion on this as well as to whether it's the right, funding mechanism. At a practical level, if you are interested, you may need consent, to consent to this kind of investment. So again, just practically thinking through what is your own governance structure to accept an investment, like this. Clearly assessing, how much you need, really thinking through this. Is a limited pot, remember, and there is an indication that it could be extended when the current term runs out in September. But for the moment, it is a limited pot, and it is just the stress again across the entire innovation ecosystem, so technology and life sciences as well. I think the other thing to bear in mind, I see this a lot sometimes when people come up against, the government as a counterparty, is thinking, well, how can we make this work to our advantage? I would strongly caution against that. Don't try to get clever and negotiate, your own tweak on the terms. This is going to be kind of a take it or leave it term sheet from the government. There's not going to be time for the British Business Bank to engage wholesaling one-to-one, negotiation on this. So really, keep an eye out for what happens on the, on the detailed terms, but having a look at what's now. And also start to get aligned. I mean, it's kind of small print, but it's quite important. And as a banker, I appreciate this, but all investors or the relevant investors will have to go through, mandatory KYC checks. And for any of, your members that have opened bank accounts with SVB or anyone else will know that can sometimes be painful. And given that the scheme doesn't limit the investment you've raised to date from UK investors, if your majority investors are, for example, outside the UK, doing the customary due diligence and KYC checks on those can be, sort of cumbersome. And so just giving those investors a bit of a heads up that could be coming, down the line as well, and having all the information prepared would be prudent action.
Okay, good stuff. I can see we've got loads of questions coming in, but just before I turn to you to go through some of those, Martin, Steve, I mean, we've been pushing for something that's more appropriate for our sector, haven't we, for some time? And it's great to see this now realised with this scheme. I mean, from your point of view, from the BIA's point of view, does this cut the mustard?
I've been surprised by the positive reaction to it, in a sense, because normally I think our lot usually want to look towards equity-based things rather than loans. But I think that the fact that this is simple, trying to be done speedily, and is well constructed is welcome. And I think that there will be a lot of people who will look at this. And I think Nooman gives good advice here about what it's fit for, and hopefully you can get to quite a rapid decision about whether this is a vehicle you want or not. We would of course love to see R&D tax credits sort of supercharged, and we were batting for that, but the Treasury haven't at present picked that one up. But it's great to see that there's a variety of things, and I hope within the smorgasbord of opportunity here, there is something that can fit for your company if you're interested or you need it in the coming period of time.
Okay, great stuff. Now, Martin, hopefully you've been able to see some of the questions. The reason I throw them to you is because you have or you haven't?
I can't find them on my. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Well, let me have a go at this then. It just means that you're going to get them cold, so get ready for some quick responses. Okay. When are we going to? Here's a simple one to start with from Pepe. When are we going to need know more details about the requirements, the application processes, etc.? I mean, have we got any timeline on this? Nooman, do you know when we can expect this to kind of firm up?
Well, I mean, the press release references May as to when the scheme will be open, and I'm afraid I can't be more concrete than that. I don't know if Martin has any further details.
No, just May at the moment. Yeah, and for the Innovate UK, as I said, hopefully in the next week or so. But I know they're all working very hard to get that out.
Yeah. Okay. In terms of eligibility, Walter here is asking. Is this available for micro companies? So it says government will provide loans to unlisted UK registered companies. Is there any kind of size constraint on this or capitalisation constraints?
What about the Innovate stuff?
Do you think? No, I think that's for loans.
Not for loans, yeah.
For the loans, you have to have raised £155,000, I think it is, Nooman.
250 last 5 years.
250, sorry, to be eligible. Already in equity.
That's pretty clear then. Are these loans capped in any way? Asked Christopher Morton. Well, there's clearly an upper limit on it, isn't there? But in terms of the size of the whole scheme, you were mentioning before that you might expect this to be expanded at some point, Nooman, and maybe it's too early to say.
Right. So I think initially the scheme is 250 for the future fund itself from the British Business Bank itself. And then the individual cheque that the BBB will write is up to 5 million sterling.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. Can you qualify if your funding in the past has been by loan rather than equity? Asked David Hipkiss.
We believe so at the moment that would classify as a qualifying investment. But again, I think this is one of the details that a few investors have raised, and we are awaiting further technical details.
Yeah, okay. Cliff Holloway here, Martin, is asking a question that I know that you've already flagged. So the headline terms state that the business must be unlisted registered company. At present, it's unclear whether unlisted includes companies listed on the alternative investment market.
Yeah, so this is to be decided according to the Treasury. I put this to them because, companies on AIM are technically unlisted, but it's not clear whether in the government's announcement whether they meant VC-backed firms being unlisted or AIM companies as well. So we are lobbying for them to include AIM-listed companies.
Okay, good stuff. Does private match funding for this loan scheme need to be new investment, or will it match against? Can the loan be matched against existing VC investment already in the company? Does it need to be new money?
So the challenge there with existing money is that it won't work from a documentation perspective. And actually, that's a practical consideration to think about. If you're in the midst of closing a private round at the moment, you may want to think strategically as to whether you delay closing that round to accommodate this particular scheme as well. So it will not apply to sort of funding that's already raised. It's to new rounds that have yet to be closed.
Okay, good stuff. All right, well, keep firing the questions. I think we've still got a little bit of time to take them, but just while you're thinking of your questions, let's just do a quick poll based on what you've heard. Let's see if I can fire this one up. I think we'd be quite interested to know, Martin, how many people think this could be suitable or whether they could be interested. Let's just see if we can load this one up and see if we can get a quick read on it. Why don't you read it out?
Yeah, so based on what we've been talking through and maybe what you've read, do you think your organisation would be interested in this convertible loan scheme? So A, very likely to apply, B, fairly likely, C, fairly unlikely, D, very unlikely, or E, don't know.
Okay, good vote. Just while we're going through the vote, Martin Newman, I just had a clarification through from Christopher Morton saying he meant, is there a value cap on the convertible notes rather than the amount? Does that make sense? I must admit, I confess that's passing me by now in terms of the detail, but does that make any sense?
I think I know what it's referring to, and if it is, if it's about a sort of pre-money valuation cap, then no, there isn't.
Ah, right, okay. You're talking about the kind of the value of the company as it stands at the moment then?
Yeah, that's what I believe the question is referring to.
Ah, okay, yeah, good stuff. All right,
It's
polls going well.
one of the way, I mean, there's a bit of a small print actually in the terms that it's actually quite an important clause, but it relates to, I guess, future valuation of the company. If you read closely, you'll see that if you choose not to convert, there's 100% redemption premium. So you actually pay back the principal and then a premium which equates to the amount you borrowed as well. So it's 100% redemption premium. And that, again, I think speaks to the commerciality of, this loan. And that's intended for the taxpayer to catch any, upside in the event of a big uplift on valuation should, you choose to sort of pay it off.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's close this poll. We've had just about half of people voting on the call, Martin. Let me just show you the results. There you go.
Quite mixed across the board, isn't it? I mean, it's quite a technical scheme, isn't it? So I guess people need to study it carefully. But out in front, we have fairly likely to apply. So generally, it's been received well. Next, you've got fairly unlikely to apply. And then we've got very unlikely to apply. So, but then quite a large number of people, 20%, don't know. So mixed opinions at the moment, isn't it?
Yeah, but 40% very or fairly likely. That sounds like a pretty, I mean, that kind of matches what you were saying, doesn't it, Steve?
Yeah, no, I think this doesn't surprise me, and I think it's about where I expected. We obviously have a broad community in the BIA, but it's interesting that it does work for, well, it seems that it might work for 40% of people on this webinar, which is positive news. I mean, yeah, and I hope that the Innovate scheme, as we go into that for more detail, may work for some people for whom this wouldn't work. So, thank you. It's I take great solace from that.
Yeah, good stuff. All right. Well, in terms of kind of what's coming up, Martin, you just got a few points, I think, just to kind of wrap this section up, haven't you? So over to you.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. We're, as I said, we're continuing to talk to the government. So please do fire in your comments to us. These questions have been really helpful. We'll try and get some clarity around those issues. But we're also trying to work with Innovate UK and British Business Bank to finesse these schemes before they are finally rolled out. So feedback from members is really important there. As Steve said, we've been calling for R&D tax credits to be advanced. We'll keep calling for that. But there has been some good news. Part of our call there was for HMRC to expedite existing claims, and they have done that. They've put more resources in, and I believe now that they have cleared the backlog. So hopefully, if you are owed money, you should have had it. Please contact me if you haven't. And they now are promising to process 95% of claims within 28 days. So again, that's something for us to hold them to as well.
Okay, good stuff. And Steve, I mean, I think you've already said that, pretty much what Martin said there, but any further thoughts on how you see this developing in the next couple of weeks?
Well, you can see that this is obviously a dynamic picture. I mean, I think we have built strong relationships and can be a conduit for discussion, whether with the BBB or with Innovate or with HMT. We're keen to work across, in coalition with other people, and I hope that you can see that we've been able to find some useful stuff for you here. There will be questions on the detail, and the operationalization of this is really, really important, and we can see that it's got to work, and it's got to work at the timeframes that the businesses need to work. So staying dynamic in that discussion as we go through April and into May, I think will be important on both of these schemes and the other schemes. And it's things like, as Martin said, things like, the Treasury putting some more people on the R&D tax credit payouts is helpful, and it's little things like that. If we can just keep up on those operational points, then I hope we can drive on those, as well as give some feedback to the government about what I know for them is a key sector of the economy for the future.
Okay, just to finish up on government support then, I'm just going to give you, Nooman, the final word on this. I mean, 40% of people saying very or fairly likely to get involved in this. I mean, that's good news based on the efforts you've put in today, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think, as Steve said, it's not going to be appropriate for everyone, and clearly there are more details still to be released by HMT, and people shouldn't jump into this blindly, but I think it is the right solution. Again, going back to those governing principles of getting something out there speedy, that's simple and market standard as well. Remember, I'm sure a lot of the members would prefer the more sort of freestyle money R&D tax credits. But I'm encouraged by this being really a start, and we look forward to further developments from HMT as well.
Yeah. Do you know if there are any further developments in the pipeline?
Well, again, I can only reference that the press release that said they will review the situation in September, and I'm sure that they will review it before then. You've just seen what happened with the the business interruption loan scheme, which got expanded rather quickly. And I think what it does show is that the government is listening real time and responding real time as well. So I'd encourage you to speak to Steve and Martin and yourself, lobby hard for the right solutions that you think are needed, and I'm sure they'll do a great job in representing that view to HMT.
Okay, well, that's a brilliant positive note to end on. But Nooman, thank you so much for joining us today. Your contribution has been outstanding and so valuable. I'm just going to kind of nice clap from Steve there. Right, Steve, back to you, because we're just going to do our usual run-in now. So, future engagement opportunities on COVID-19 with us.
Yeah, there's more of us than there is of EastEnders these days, isn't there? So we'll do another one next Thursday. I don't think we've quite decided what the topic will be. It'd be lovely if we could do the Innovate, more detailed dive on the Innovate stuff. We'll have a look as to see what's moved, and we'll do another one.
We'll definitely talk about it. I don't know whether that'll be the. I think our guests that we're lining up more focused on the research side again.
Excellent. Yeah, no, there's lots of developments there, and the Jane Osborne's crew in terms of the antibodies. I think there's some really interesting science going on there. It'd be great to be able to give people that. The other one that obviously the HM government is still doing more on their national testing strategy. They're doing an update this afternoon on where they've got to with lab capacity, how labs can come alongside, how ones have already, and what the next steps are for other ones. Update on antibody testing and an update on supply. So that's the third in that series, which we're doing with BIVDA, ABHI, ABPI. I hope the Secretary of State will be able to join and speak at that one this afternoon. So if you're interested, do register for that. Links for that is on the website. And if you're interested in partnering around COVID-19 developments, the platform is now open with Evaluate and others for the virtual partnering event, which will happen in the beginning of May. Have a look at that, and that's a global event and may be useful if you're putting things together. If you're not a member of the BIA and you've enjoyed what we're doing, Michael McGivern, our membership manager, will be very keen to hear from you. We do lots of stuff in normal time that's beyond this. Obviously, influencing, connecting, and saving you money is vital. We put people together on advisory groups, and we'd be really keen to get to know you better. If you don't know us very well, do give Michael an email if you'd like to know more about what we do throughout the time.
Okay, good stuff, Steve. Well, we're at 5 to 12. There is time for any last questions. Why don't I just, for the sake of, we've got a couple of seconds to finish up with. Let me see if I can just pick one or two out at the end here, because this is all about our viewers ultimately. All right, here's an interesting one for you, Martin. Could there be a simple scheme to protect IP costs for businesses that may have these coming up? It would help support IP attorneys and firms too. You've been talking a lot to our IP community. Any thoughts on that? I think the simple answer is we don't know of anything like that yet. But what's the view from the IP committee at this stage?
I mean, we've talked in the past about including IP costs into R&D tax credit eligible costs. We've not had any conversations specifically under COVID-19 support about IP, Sam Whitehouse, do contact me and explain a bit more about what you've got in mind, and it's perhaps something we can throw into the mix.
Yeah, okay, good stuff. All right, well, I think, to be honest, I think I have covered most of the questions that have come in here. If you feel like I haven't done you justice, do please put further comments in the feedback survey when we go through that. It'd be also really interesting to know what other topics you'd like us to cover as part of future BIA COVID-19 webinars. So there'll be a chance to put that into the comments box when you get the feedback survey as well, which our events team we'll send you after we close this webinar. I think, Steve, I'm just going to end by giving recognition to the team that sits behind this webinar that does a lot of the hard work, but doesn't appear on the screen. So well done, fantastic work again by Georgina Treen, our events manager, who I know is listening, but doesn't get to say much. So well done, Georgina, and all of the team behind the webinar development. So Sam, Jane Wall, our membership director, and Mark's here as well. Did a fantastic job of setting these things up to us. And then just finally, just to end, brilliant contribution. Thank you so much again for joining us, Nooman. Plenty of discussions to be had on this. Perhaps if you'd be willing, it'd be great to have you back to talk about how things stand in a few weeks' time. We'd love to have you. Steve, last word to you, I think.
Well, just thanks everybody, and thanks for engagement. Great to see everybody's finding these of use and value. And thank you, Michael. Excellent hosting. Have a good next few days.
Okay, brilliant. We'll end it there. See you next time, folks. Thanks a lot.